Good day, everyone. I am Mark Randolph Tellis, and I am here to report to you about the Module 10, entitled The Neurofunctional Theory. Linguists are concerned with the analysis of the structure of language and the creation of models which explain certain linguistic phenomena. One field of study that aids linguists in finding answers to questions regarding language learning and language acquisition is psycholinguistics. It pursues the question, how is language actually stored in and processed by the brain? The brain is one of the most complex organs of the human body. Hence, knowledge about its inner working is extremely limited. The study of the human brain is made difficult primarily for two reasons. First, the brain is well protected in a bony covering. Making access to it is extremely difficult. Second, the neurons of the brain do not regenerate. Thus, any invasive manipulation of the brain carries with it the real risk of introducing permanent brain damage. Despite the foregoing difficulties, however, brain studies have led scientists and researchers to the knowns about language and the brains. So, linguists are actually curious about the neurofunctional in the brain of specifically about language. So here in this module, we will be discussing the relevance of neurofunctional theory in teaching and learning a language. Differentiate primary language acquisition from secondary language acquisition. Explain Mendeleev's neurofunctional theory in relation to SLA or secondary language acquisition. And also we will enumerate and describe the different types of aphasia. Now, before we proceed, let's first describe the theory. So, according to Lamandelia, there is a connection between language function and the neural anatomy. It is important, however, to recognize that, as Hutch puts it, there is no single black box for language in the brain. It is not possible to identify precisely which areas of the brain are associated with language functioning. It is therefore better to speak of the relative contribution of some areas more than others under certain conditions. The neurofunctional accounts of SLA have considered the contribution of two areas of the brain. First, the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere, in particular those known Wernicke's and Broca's areas, and it is in the left hemisphere, which clinical studies have shown to be closely associated with the comprehension and production language. So this is the left and the right hemisphere of the brain. Also, the neurofunctional accounts have also tended to focus on specific aspects of SLA. First, we have the age differences. They believe that uh, younger younger learners has neuroplasticity. They can adapt, they can evolve, they can learn much more language than the older ones. Second, the formulaic speech, expressions of phrases or statements that are conventional, predictable, and often repeated without much variation. Example of this is how are you, thank you. They are already pre-constructed words instead of having an originality of formulating new kinds of speech or languages. Third, the fossilization, a point where a learner's language skills reach to a peak and cease to improve. So, and the fourth one, the pattern practice in a classroom is LA. Patterns refer to recurring structures, methods, behaviors that influence how students acquire a new language. Example of this is input-output patterns and the error patterns. So, so that's the description of the theory. Now, let's go to the right hemisphere functioning. Right hemisphere functioning is generally associated with holistic processing, as opposed to serial analytic processing, which occurs in the left hemisphere. Kurashian and Obler suggested that the right hemisphere is responsible for the storing of of processing of formulaic speech, like thank you, you're welcome, those polite words that we already pre-constructed. Genesee made another research and found out that the right hemisphere is associated to a greater extent with informal than formal language acquisition. This hypothesis is also compatible with the right hemisphere connection with formulaic speech, which is generally considered to be more prominent in settings where natural language use is common. The right hemisphere may also be involved in pattern practice in classroom (SLA). Seliger suggests that the right hemisphere may act as an initial staging mechanism for handling patterns which can then be re-examined later in the left hemisphere functioning. Where the left hemisphere is concerned, there is less clarity regarding the location of specific language functions. In general, the left hemisphere is associated with creative language use, including syntactic and semantic processing, and the motor operations involved in speaking and writing. So we have here the characteristics of left and the right brain. So the left brain dominance or intellectual is good in remembering names, responds to verbal instructions and explanations, experiments systematically with control, prepares talking and writing, rarely uses metaphors, analytic reader, planned and structured, makes objective judgments, controls feelings, and favors logical problem solving. Wherein the right brain dominance, intuitive, remembers faces instead of names, responds to demonstrated, illustrated, or symbolic instructions, experiments randomly and with less restraints, prefers drawing and manipulating objects, frequently uses metaphors, synthesizing reader, fluid and spontaneous, makes subjective judgments, more free with feelings, and favors intuitive problem solving. So Stevie concluded that the left brain dominant second language learners are better at producing separate words, gathering the specifics of language, carrying out sequences of operations, and dealing with abstraction, classification, labeling, and reorganization. Right brain dominant learners, on the other hand, appear to deal better with whole images, with generalizations, with metaphors, and with emotional reactions and artistic expressions. From the viewpoint of LaMendelia, there are two basic types of language acquisition. First, the primary language acquisition and the secondary language acquisition. The first, primary language acquisition, is found in the child's acquisition of one or more languages from 2 to 5 years. So there are children nowadays that tend to learn English in some manners, especially Filipino children that are uh, capable of having English shows in their own mobile phones. So they acquire the English language through those platforms like for example, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, and etc. So they acquire those language without the classroom setup. On the other hand, the second one is subdivided into foreign language learning, which means the uh, learning of language in a classroom setup, and the second language acquisition, where we acquire the second language based on the environment that we have. For example, the exposure in a television, we learn Tagalog because of the shows, the advertisements that we can watch from those platforms. So La Mendelia pinpoints two systems as particularly important for language functioning. First, we have the communication hierarchy, has the responsibility for language and other forms of interpersonal communication. So when you say interpersonal communication, it is the communication between individuals and focuses on how language is used to interact, build relationships, and convey meaning socially. While the cognitive hierarchy controls a variety of cognitive information processing activities that are also part of language use, which is also known as intrapersonal, centers on internal thought processes and self-directed use of language for reflection, problem solving, and organizing thoughts. Primary language acquisition and also second language acquisition are marked by the use of communication hierarchy, whereas foreign language acquisition is marked by the use of the cognitive hierarchy. So now let's proceed to aphasia. So what is aphasia? A language disorder caused by brain damage, often from a stroke, that impairs a person's ability to communicate. It can affect the speaking, understanding, reading, and writing, while intelligence remains unaffected. Aphasia provides support for the view that language is localized in the left hemisphere. There are different types of aphasia, which yield even more information about the specific linguistic abilities are located. Depending upon where the brain damage is sustained, different abilities will be affected. Damage to a region of the brain known as Broca's area will result in one type of aphasia called Broca's aphasia. Broca's aphasiacs suffer from an inability to plan the motor sequences used in speech. When they attempt to speak, they speak haltingly and have a difficult time getting the words out. So this is the part of the brain where the Broca's area is located. While Broca's aphasia results in primarily expressive difficulties, Wernicke's aphasia results in primarily receptive disorder. However, even though a patient with Wernicke's aphasia does not find it hard to speak, there is a tendency for the aphasiacs to produce semantically incoherent speech. Patients with Wernicke's aphasia are unable to comprehend the speech of others. They often cannot follow simple directions or instructions such as stand up, turn to your right, and so on. So this is the part of the brain where the Wernicke's area is located. So this sides of the brain of the where the Broca's aphasia and the Wernicke's aphasia is the left side or left hemisphere of the brain. So both of them are located on the left hemisphere. So the last type of aphasia which will be discussed is called the conduction aphasia. A patient suffering from conduction aphasia sounds something like a Wernicke's aphasia fluent but meaningless speech, but shows signs of being able to comprehend the speech of others. The patient will be able to understand utterances but will not be able to repeat them. Aphasia results from the arcuate fasciculus, a region where fiber tracts link Broca's and Wernicke's areas. So this is the arcuate fasciculus is located in the part of the brain. It connects the Broca's area and the Wernicke's area. So when it is the one that is damaged, it will be called the conduction aphasia, wherein he will be the patient, the aphasiac, will be able to understand utterances but will not be able to repeat them. The pattern of symptoms which results from the type of damage may indicate that those fibers tracts transfer meanings formed in Wernicke's area to Broca's area, where they are then translated into motor commands for the vocal organs. So those are the different types of aphasias. So last but not the least, implications of the theory to language teaching. The left-right brain construct helps to define another useful learning style continuum, with implications for second language learning and teaching. So Denisi, for example, uses neurological bimodality to analyze the way in which various language teaching methods have failed by appealing too strongly to the left brain processes in the language classroom. Crusher, Silliger, and Hartnett found support for the hypothesis that left brain dominant second language learners preferred a deductive style of teaching, while right brain dominant learners appeared to be more successful in an inductive classroom environment. Therefore, the neurofunctional theory is the connection of cognitive capability of a human being to acquire or learn languages. In addition, aphasia has proven that language is processed simultaneously in the brain. If damaged, we will become less of a human. That would be all, and I thank you.